All right. Well, welcome everybody. It's Friday. Yay! We're on our 12th episode of Eat, Learn, and Grow with Tinhorn. And during these times of metamorphosis, we remain committed to the betterment of our tribal communities. Tinhorn is beyond grateful to our team, clients, and community for your continued support. And we are driven to ignite Indigenous connections and are pursuing this vision in new ways, such as creating the space for all of us to connect through our weekly Eat, Learn, and Grow with Tinhorn. Just because we are physically distancing, it doesn't mean we are not socially connecting. And we're doing that by sharing stories of how to cope and grow during this time and sharing some tips along the way. And for the past 9 years, Tinhorn has provided connecting, training, and marketing services to Indian country and those who are working with our tribal communities. Collectively, we are spending more time online. And when was the last time you visited your website? Tinhorn is offering our Eat, Learn, and Grow participants a complimentary website review that you can book at tinhorn-consulting.com. So my name is April Tinhorn, and I'm Hualapai Navajo in Chinese, and I am your host for today's episode of No Vote, No Voice. And when Native voices are heard, or Native voices are heard when we vote, and being a part of the political process is one step towards achieving equity and positive outcomes. Last week, we discussed words matter, that words carry energy, words have power, and we're living through these times as our country is going through protests. And I know that's left a lot of us thinking, well, what can I do? And that's what has led to this episode of No Vote, No Voice. When I was speaking with a friend, he was talking about how one of the low-hanging fruits of change is actually voting. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And, as I was thinking about this topic today about voting, the first thing I thought about was my mom and how, as a kid, looking up to my mom, I remember her consistently voting throughout her lifetime. And she voted for people who championed the causes that mattered to her. And like I shared on Hualapai, I grew up in Peach Springs, Arizona on the Hualapai Reservation. And our family, even though we're a small one, we're politically active. And one of my aunties was our first Hualapai chairwoman. And my mom and some of her siblings have served our community on council. And I think about how I grew up with voting through examples by the people I looked up to. I knew that voting mattered. It was something that was important. It's something that we took effort to be informed and to follow through with action and actually vote. And so I looked at it as a part of the rite of passage. I looked forward to the time I could rock that little I voted sticker. And when I think about the first time that I voted, I was a freshman at Arizona State University. It was the presidential elections of 1992. And I remember friends asking me, like, what are we going to do for your 18th birthday? You're legal, you're an adult now. And much to many of their surprise, I said, join me in voting. So that night, instead of going to a party, we actually gathered on ASU's campus and we went to our local polling site. And I remember that there was a line, and we just had all cross sections of America there, And I remember being there and actually waiting for hours, well, probably like 45 minutes. But during that time, to talk with my friends who are mostly other Native students at ASU, and for us to just talk about, these were good friends of mine, but I realized we had never really discussed, I didn't know a lot about their values. I didn't know a lot about the causes that they cared for. And we were talking about which candidate, exemplified those characteristics that were of value to us as Americans, in my case, a Hualapai, as a woman. And it was really cool just to hear everybody's perspective. But more importantly, it was amazing because after, my birthday, I can say I voted with like a group of Native students. That was the best 18th birthday wish come true. And I continue to make efforts to vote because I remember as a kid, my mom, when she was a councilwoman on our council, she would talk about, people would come up to her to complain about what was going on, and she would like stop them, and she'd be like, "Did you vote?" And a lot of times they would like, "Oh, no, my vote doesn't matter. It really doesn't make a difference," or there wasn't anyone that was a good candidate. And then she was just like, "Well, I don't want to hear what you have to say because you didn't do your part. And so now you need to live with the consequences of inaction." And I remember that. And so that's a part of my story of my first memory of voting. And I would now like to introduce our panelist for today. I'm joined by Miss Raina Roanhorse, and she is going to be talking about the importance of voting. She's Navajo from Pine Springs, Arizona. She's currently the Native American Outreach Specialist at Instituto. And after doing some research on you, Raina, I found out you're a fellow entrepreneur and that you're the founder of Healing Grounds Coffee Shop, which I heard that it's going to be opening back up soon, and we'll be able to get some delicious grounds over there, and that you have a bachelor's in English, chemistry, and pre-med from the University of New Mexico. And another thing that came up in your Google search is you're also another sorority girl. I saw that. I was a Chi Sigma, but what sorority did you pledge?
Alpha Pi Omega, and that's the first Native American women's sorority.
Sweet. Well, if you could, Raina, welcome to our community, and if you would also like to share share with us your first voting experience and why voting matters to you. I'd
Absolutely.
appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for having me, April. I really appreciate that. I'm going to introduce myself in Navajo, which is something that we formally do. Hello, my friends and family. Raina Roanhorse, Unisheth. Bilagana Nishma, Pabahe, A Bushishi, Bilagana A Dashache, Kia Ani A Dashanella, Akut Ego, Dene Atsan Nishma. I'm just introducing my clans. The clans that I have are Edgewater and also a Towering House. And as a woman, I introduce and identify myself as a Navajo woman. So glad to be here to tell you a little bit about my story of voting as I say, and that was just a really great story. April, thank you for sharing that. I was 18 years old and I voted for the first time. My parents had always encouraged me, like your family, April, to register to vote with the state of Arizona, and then also with our local chapter house in Wide Ruins. A lot of times our chapter houses will give out scholarships when we're going to school, and so it's important to be enrolled to vote. And the community that I am from was Pine Springs, Arizona, and we kind of sit in the middle between two different districts. So I had the choice to either register for Wide Ruins or Oak Springs, and I registered at Wide Ruins. And I've always been taught too that it's my duty and my civic responsibility to vote. I had graduated from Sanders Valley High School. Gosh, this was back in 1999, earlier in the spring, and had enrolled as a political science major in college. And I had the goal of attending law school, becoming a lawyer, and then running for office in the Navajo Nation. And this is a picture of the windmill in Pine Springs where we, hauled water growing up. And, so I'm a small town girl and grew up, on the res with my grandmother and my great grandmother there. So during high school, I participated in every offered sport just to get out of class as much as possible. I was involved in student council. I vividly remember being the senior class president, and I had to crack up when the three guys in my class, shouted out that they wanted to go to Alcatraz for our senior class trip. And I'm like, no! Thank goodness for democracy because the rest of the class collectively voted and decided to go to California's amusement park. So we went to Knott's Berry Farm, Disneyland, Universal Studios, and did, a lot of the usual things that you do in California. In college, I was involved in the student senate or the council and spent a lot of my times in meetings and making decisions about how student funds should be appropriated among student clubs. So I learned, I think, very early on the importance of voting and to, like you, April, to be actively engaged. And so when election time rolls around, I continue to go back to White Orange Chapter House, which was built in the 1930s. It's a very old stone building, but they still have chapter house meetings. And, I cast my vote for the tribal and state elections. And, during that time, it's when the community comes out and the people that are running for office, they set up, little pavilions and tents and they serve fried bread and coffee.
Mm.
And it's just a time for a lot of the people in the community to come out. And it's almost like a social gathering to, eat food, just drink coffee and talk and visit with each other. And then you get in line and you vote. So, just want to say just a little background story about my first time voting there.
Thank you, Raina. Can you also share with us like big picture type work you're doing with our being the Native American specialist working at Instituto and how that might be of interest or how we can support you in that?
Sure, absolutely. So right now I'm working as the Native American outreach specialist with Instituto. And so my job that I was hired to do was actually to come on board to uh, basically coordinate a Native American and voter engagement project. So we have a really cool contest that's coming up that's going to give $30,000 to an individual or organization that can come up with the best idea to get more people to come out to vote. So that kind of led to setting that contest up, and we're ready to launch that very soon. And because of the pandemic, one of the things I had been requested to do is actually write a report on the impact that COVID-19 is having on the tribal communities in Arizona, and what that looks like for the fall elections and how that's going to impact our tribal communities. Because like I said, going back to voting in my community, at least on the Navajo Nation, is a social gathering. People come out for food and friends and family. People come out to visit and talk, and it's a social time. So now that the pandemic has all affected us, we have to think about how is that going to look like in the fall. We're probably not going to be able to do some of those things. So we're really looking at the barriers that the pandemic is having right now to voting in the tribal community, and trying to identify some of those barriers and plan to overcome those barriers so people can vote in the fall.
Yeah, well, that's thank you for sharing what you're currently doing, Raina. And I think that leads great into the first question I have. And this is, as you know, on Eat, Learn, and Grow with Tinhorn, we're a community where we're all about our discussions. So this is open to everybody who's participating. Is what do you think may prevent people from voting in November?
Okay, this is Barbara Tinhorn.
Mm-hmm.
And to answer that question is like the polls. Over here in Peach Springs, we've had lockdowns. Our longest lockdown was from May 15th to June 5th for 21 days. And getting to the polls, also, if they're not registered, to vote, that's another thing. Like we just, last Saturday, the 6th, we did our general election to do our chair and vice and 3 council members. And what we
what
did,
community are you coming from, Barbara? Hey.
Hualapai, Peach Springs, Arizona, the one and only.
Hey.
And what has happened is we had our primary, Then for the chair and vice, so we got the two top candidates. And on our general election, the two top candidates for the chair, the two top candidates for the vice, and then a bunch for the three council members. And what we did, I was on the election board, and it was my first time. And that, it was a lot of work. And like we did for packages for the general election all over the United States, putting the ballots out there and trying to, you know, we tried to do it and in a timely manner, but mail, however it takes to get to Hawaii, they probably weren't able to get it back in time. And over the East Coast, we're all over the Hualapais in the United States. So it's just, and then people coming out, like what we did was before we had the drive-through, but with the weather being cold and windy, they had the inn. So there's just a lot of things that can go on for your election in the fall, that it may be good, it may not be good.
Thank you for sharing your experience from Hualapai. And for those not familiar, the Hualapai Reservation is in Northwest Arizona, located in the capital is Peach Springs, Arizona. And I believe is it like 2,400 registered members, and how many
Yes.
eligible voters?
There was 1,904. And like, this was a good turnout to the mail-in with the ones that came in to vote that day, June 6th. We had 645 ballots.
Wow, so roughly like a little over a third.
Yes.
I was going to say that's really impressive. I mean, that you had that many. Now that was for tribal elections then?
Yes.
Okay. I have a question for everyone here too is, you know, one of the biggest concerns I think this year is the fear of getting sick and getting the virus. A lot of people are still, you know, there are some tribes that still have restrictions, still are on lockdowns, and are still protecting their communities. So as we move into the fall, I know that there are concerns of people, you know, getting sick. And so I wanted to know how everyone, you know, is thinking about that as well in the fall for elections.
Okay. It's Tinhorn again, Barbara from Hualapai. What has happened? If in your, I don't know of other tribes, but in our area, we have, it's called the ICT team, and they're the ones that pretty well, because of the cases and whatnot, and the spreading, and you know, the different things, that along with tribal council, ICT probably, if we're in lockdown, and if a person requests that they want to vote, that's probably how they're going to do it. Is they'll come and bring the vote, and then pick up the vote when they call in.
Oh wow, wow.
Yes, that's how we had for the ones that were infected. That's how, and the ones that were affected, they had it in a Ziploc bag. So when we were opening the ballots and whatnot, like for us, you do your ballot voting, and then you put it in a regular white envelope that's included in the package, and it has absentee voting on there. Then you put it in another brown envelope, and on the back of the envelope, there is a place where you print your name and sign your name. So that's how we probably will be doing it up here for the voting.
Voting in the fall. Well, it's really good to hear what other communities are doing around the state, especially tribal communities in Arizona, and how they're handling that. I had heard of a tribal community up in Canada who had their tribal elections, and so they set up stations and they had sanitizing stations, and so the whole process, even sanitizing the pens and making sure that people were kept safe during that time, was time consuming, but people still came out and voted and participated, and that's really good to hear.
Okay, this is Tinhorn again from Hualapai. Um,
30
over,
seconds.
well,
Ah.
okay, you're only in group meetings and whatnot, you're only allowed 10. And in a building, you know what? In a closed building, you can get it more, the C19. What we did was we gave out drive-through and gave out pencils that we did not want back. So no, and the people that were on the election board had the hand sanitizer. So that's one thing to consider too,
Good, good.
because closed inside a building and your limit of people, you can expose more people to C19. Outside, you have more of an open space, the drive-through, and then our board wore the masks and had hand sanitizer. That's what I would say.
Good.
Boca.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that communities are thinking and planning. And one of the things that I think is wonderful about our Native communities is that we, have learned to adapt, and we continue to adapt, so well, despite, some of the obstacles that are in our way to things in life. So it's really encouraging to hear that, and it's also hopeful to hear that, that can be done, and people are coming up with ideas of how to do that. Thank you.
And so do others have actually, well, I wanted to transition to this question. I was curious. So, what do you think would be needed for the majority of people in your communities to vote? And this could be at the tribal level. I'm really curious about at the local level, because we do, in essence, as Indigenous people, we're dual citizens, citizens of our respective nations and tribes, and we're also American citizens. So I always kind of feel like my priority has always been to the tribal election. And then I made a point to always vote in the federal election. But as I am becoming more informed, I'm finding out that the issues that matter to me really get implemented on the daily at the local level. And so I haven't really paid a lot of attention to local elections, and yet they're the judges who are ruling on different cases, and the police officers. Now that I'm a mom of an elementary age daughter, education, health. I mean, we're in this right now, right? Like the preparedness for different health emergencies, and a lot of times autonomy is given for the implementation at the local level. So that's the question I have for the group here is, what do you think is needed to get more of our people to be able to vote? I'll start with you, Raina.
Okay. Just hearing from different people and asking, the same questions too, of what is needed. I think one of the biggest things is we need to understand why we should vote. And we need to really understand that our vote does make a difference. It makes a difference, like you said, at the local level. It makes a difference, at the state level and also at the federal level. Sometimes when it gets to the federal level, we feel that, there's a lot of Native people who have said, I don't feel that my vote counts. I don't feel like, anything that I do makes a difference within, these systems that are working against us. And so I think it goes back to educating ourselves and really understanding the issues and finding ways to be involved and engaged. One of the things that I think that, as communities, we all need each other. We need connection, and so voting can become a social gathering, much like at the local level. And keeping that, and keeping the understanding, the importance that we come together collectively to make decisions. One of the other items is early campaigning of candidates. I think just making sure that information and materials are presented and packaged well, and informing voters is important. People really need to be informed about the issues and candidates. Yesterday, I was on a webinar, and it was nice to hear that Indian Country Today and Native Vote has paired up, and so they are creating info cards to educate voters on the different Native candidates running for offices across the country. So Native people can go to the Indian Country Today website, and they can find information about some of the candidates. And I think that we need to start doing that, using some of the social platforms, and using websites, and making sure that people can locate that information, and know what the issues are, and also about the candidates. And those are a couple of the things that I would probably answer to that question.
Well, thank you, Raina. So maybe I need to start with a overall general question then. Do you believe that, go ahead, Joanne.
I was thinking I vote in Navajo area with my home chapter, and I think that a lot of the voters, they're older in age for our area, and it's really more important to get the young people involved and to have them understand how important their vote is too. And recently the Navajo Nation and I think it's Hopi also appointed a new representative, a director, Janie Parrish, who's been with, I think, Indian Country Today, and she's an ASU alum. She's going to be spearheading the marketing and voter outreach for the northern Arizona area. So I think that's a good move on the part with, she's Democratic, so for the DNC to advocate at that level, and her target is going to be getting the word out to getting young people involved, because especially in our Navajo Nation, there's more young people that are voters that are not fully registered to vote, and they don't really participate in the election process. And I think just more education it would be needed for that, in getting more of the word out in social media. And I think that's what Janie's expertise is. So that'll be good.
Okay. So that's what Janie's going to be doing. I saw the announcement yesterday on social media, and she comes from Emily's Vote, and also prior to that, I think Native Vote.
Yeah.
So
She's already done the national campaigns, and she's very familiar with like the Native candidates and their platforms.
That's good.
Yeah.
So that's one solution, right? Is finding or targeting voters that don't vote, right? And then having some resources put towards it so that they can be reached and they can be informed. That's one solution.
Yeah, actually, this is Stanford. I do agree with Joanne's what she mentioned here. I do a lot of consulting work on Navajo Nation, so it's easy for me to say that I can, during election time, I'm able to vote within my chapter with the just voting and stuff. And so I know a lot about Navajo Nation government. But also I do consulting, like I said, with say inequality. So as an engineer, I go into homes and assess a lot of homes. So a lot of the younger folks I know, they're working or they're not working. So it seems like there has to be a way to educate them. I mean, it's like a process where they pretty much say, well, my vote don't count. You know, why should I go out to my local chapter just to register? And to me, it's almost like if there's a way to maybe have door to door and say, hey, just fill this registration out. I know elders. I see elders at chapter elections, and they're there to socialize and just make sure their votes count. But the younger generation, there has to be a way to pull them in, I guess. To me, I think one solution would just be to do a door-to-door. I don't know if it's allowed. And if they're registered, register them, and then during election day, go back, have volunteers go out, and if there's a way to have them vote there at their home, and then seal that envelope and bring it back to the chapter. That way, they know the next time they can be able to go to the chapter, say, hey, I voted this way. So that way they know that their votes counted. So I don't know, that's what I think about from what I see on the reservation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Stanford. Joanne?
Another thing is that for Navajo area, their voter registration is within the community chapters is tied to any type of assistance that the chapter communities and the Navajo government provides. So with this CARES Act funding, the Navajo Nation is proposing like individual stimulus payments, just like the federal government did, but for Navajo tribal members. But the stipulation is that they have to be voting, registered to vote in their community. And so I'm not sure how all that is going to work, but that's something that has been proposed. So that might encourage people to get registered to vote.
So like incentivized voting?
Yes. But I mean, that's how they account for the number of tribal members within each chapter community. So it's like the census, how they get allocations of, for budgets for the number of community members they serve. And so it works the same way as the census.
So I say thank you for mentioning that, Joan. I say, yeah, that's something that I know a lot of the chapter houses, their money that they receive is allocated and based upon the number of registered voters, which is why a lot of times the Navajo Election Administration Office, you need to go in to update your voter's registration card and then also take that back to the chapter house. And I know that a lot of the chapter houses for students, especially for young people, in order to give out some of the chapter house scholarships for students will require that they be registered to vote and have an active, registration file with the Navajo Nation. And I think that, that's accountability, and I think that that's important.
I'm curious for the different tribes that are here. Do you know if your tribe or any tribe does a dual registration? Like if you're registering to vote in like a federal or state election, that you automatically could vote, get registered to vote in your tribal elections? Like, are there any registration drives where it's all inclusive for our dual citizenship voting eligibility? Put that one down as an idea.
Okay. This is Tinhorn, Barbara again. They're separate. The registration for your tribal is different from voting with the feds. Then I have a question. Joanne, did you say that that stimulus money from the government, you guys were thinking of using it to have it as if they come and vote, that they get get money? Is that what I understood? Or did I understand it wrong?
No, it's a proposal. It's been a proposal. The tribal council and the office of the Navajo Nation president have been going back and forth on that, but it's not the stimulus funding payouts for Navajo tribal members. It's not tied to the voting, but the way they're seeing it is you have to be registered to vote in that community chapter. So there's 110 community chapters throughout the Navajo Nation. Yeah. So you have to be registered in order to be allocated that funding. So otherwise they can't account for the numbers. So okay. That's how they're thinking of basing it on voter registration, but then there's another party that's saying it should be your tribal enrollment status, not your voting status. So it's gone back and forth. But they haven't decided that. It hasn't been fully approved. It's just on the table.
Okay, why I'm asking that, Joanne, is that CARES Act money The stim, or is that the one? Okay. What is we're finding out is you cannot use that to pay people like that. What will happen is if you do something like that, the government is going to take back, you're going to owe, your tribe will owe the government. Some people, some tribes, they went and used that money to help pay the people that, you know, needed to buy stuff and bills. And now they're having to pay back that the certain tribes that I know of. So just if you know people that are in your government up there, tell them so you guys will not get in trouble.
Yeah, I think that was what the someone did bring up that issue, and that they wanted to make sure that it was within the scope of the what's allowable under that funding. So I'm sure they've already determined that, and I think it was on the table as of 2 weeks ago, but now I haven't heard anybody mention that anymore. But so I don't think they're moving forward with that, but it was an idea that was on the table.
So I would like to ask the group, do you feel that your vote matters? Please explain.
Tinhorn will go again, Barbara. Yes, your vote matters in anything. And don't believe that your vote, okay, for example, for your local government, your vote might be the winning, the vote for the winning somebody's position. Also, with the native votes, the thing is we're counted. So our votes are counted and it's used for different things for the feds and whatnot of how they're going to calculate. So any vote that you have to do, it matters. And I vote for, I'm a regular voter. I just vote.
Thank you, Barbara. And is it Summer or Misty? I saw your, you have your Zoom hand up, but no video. Did you want to share something?
No video.
Yeah, you
Let
just
me
went,
see. How do
you
I
just
get
went Black Lives Matter. Hey, it's a black square now. your silent statement. Hey.
Let me see. How do I get back? Huh.
Well, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. It's Misty. I'm of the Hualapai tribe. My vote mattered since I was 18. Even, I would say, even before that, when I was 14, when I first got my job, did the vote matter, but did my voice matter? So, you know, starting a job at such a young age, you know, and then now being an adult with my children, I sit there, we go through the news. I have to let them know that, I guess, if you will, we're numbered. And each of us are numbered, and each of our numbers count. So if we don't get from 1 to 100, what's gonna happen? Or let's say 1 to 50, and then somebody in 25 didn't come into play. Well, where did 25 go? There's no explanation. So I live 12 hours away from Peach Springs, so I have access to where I can get on the Hualapai Tribe website, and then, you know, they're pretty much up to date from what I've seen a couple of years ago. But prior to, I would have to call their elections office, or I'd have to call somebody there at the tribal office and say, hello, you know, I don't reside on the reservation, but I'm here, and I need an absentee ballot in that's where my vote does count.
Thank you, Misty.
So this is Joanne again. I live about 5.5 hours from my community chapter where I vote, but I always make it a point to be there to vote in person, because I think it's important. I mean, even if it's just one vote, but it's important to be able to vote at the local community level, because at the same time, we vote for like our chapter officials and people that are going to be representing our community. And we also vote for our tribal council members too. And so they represent like multiple communities. So I just feel like, I take it upon myself to be knowledgeable about the different backgrounds of the candidates. And I also use that information and share it with my family, because they say, well, who do we need to vote for, and who do you think we should vote for? I mean, it's not illegal to share, some of the advantages of each candidate and what their background is. So I usually share with my family, the best candidates that I feel like will meet our collective needs. And so even at the national level, it's one vote among millions, but it's still a vote. And with our tribal members, we didn't get the opportunity to have that vote until in the mid-1960s or somewhere about that. And so a lot of our ancestors fought hard for us to be able to vote. And I think that I stress that to my kids. I have two 20-year-olds, and they're both in college, and they had to register to vote to get a scholarship from the chapter community and from the Navajo Nation. So that's why that they saw the importance even before that. My son was 17 right at the last election, and he was so bummed that he couldn't vote because he was still 17 and had about like 1 month left till he was 18. But he did go to the polls with me just to experience what the voting process entails and stuff. So I was really happy that he was interested in that process. And so now at ASU, he's part of the student government, and they also help in getting out the vote on campus too.
Good.
That's cool. Thank you for sharing. And I also was wondering, we all have the right to vote, and we've been talking about that today, but what should institutions do to ensure our right to vote is accessible and equitable? I think this is a timely question, especially with the physically distancing times that we're in. Us all being Native, we know about like I'll open it up there. So the question again was, what should institutions do to ensure our right to vote is accessible and equitable?
I'll give my 2 cents. This is Joanne again. I think that it's important to make it as accessible as you can by, especially with today's time of what's going on with this pandemic, that people need to be safe, to have that reassurance that they're going to be safe in getting out to the voting poll locations. But the big thing is the vote by mail. I heard that there's, issues with that too, that some places are not allowing that. And just seeing what happened in Georgia, people didn't get their mail-in ballots, so they had to go in, try to vote, and they got overwhelmed. The polling locations got overwhelmed with voters, so they had to stay open later to make sure that everybody that was in line got to vote. And so, and it wasn't just like all of Georgia, it was just like the underserved lower income communities that had people waiting in long lines, where the other, more affluent communities had hardly any waiting time. I'm like, what's wrong with this picture and how do we fix that? But I think it's best to, open more polling locations where there's going to be more people coming out to vote.
Yeah.
I say absolutely, Joan. I thank you for your input, because that's a huge issue. I think one of the things that institutions can do is facilitate discussions and listen to the conversations and plan ahead to prepare and also, to make sure that we are supporting one another and supporting the Get Out the Vote organizations. I know that like ITCA, Four Directions, Need a Vote with NCAI, things that are going on in our local communities. A lot of times we need to be in contact with our counties and also with the Secretary of State, and we need to ask where polling locations will be, because a lot of people don't even know where the polling locations will be. I think that that's a role that institutions can help support. And then also NCAI has also called for Native people to request polling locations for all of our tribal communities. We have 22 tribal communities in the state of Arizona, and those are federally recognized tribes. And so we need to have 22 locations. And like you said, many people drive more than an hour or two to go to their community and to vote. One of the things that I think institutions can also do too is we need to make information basic to understand, and we need to be able to have information that's clear and concise about directions, how to register to vote, and also the process there in informing people.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and my sister serves on the election day at our community polling location, and we have Navajo interpreters to explain the ballots to our elderly community that do not speak English very well. So that's really helpful. And my sister's very fluent in Navajo, and she can rattle that off really well. And I wish I could do that, but she does great in that, and she helps with the voting every year. But I think it's important to have the translators on site to be able to do that.
Yep, and to make the sites accessible to all, people with different abilities and, just color blindness or, dexterity issues. But I appreciate the discussion we've been able to have as, informed dual citizens, I like to think. I'd like to give Raina a few minutes before we close out. I know that you did a little teaser about the outreach campaign, and Lisa's ready to fire up your PowerPoint if you'd like to share with this group about it.
Sure, I was gonna say, whenever you're ready, Lisa. Those are a few pictures. That's the community that I'm from in Pine Springs, that's Bear Canyon. And I think the other one was, I love that, We the Resilient picture. And then whenever you're ready with the slideshow, we can go ahead and start that one. And that's of our Hogan in Pine Springs.
Hey, that's where you rock the vote.
I was gonna say, there we go, yes. Is there the PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, an actual PowerPoint. It should be in that same folder, Lisa. And Raina, that picture of your community with all the greenery and the hills, it actually kind of looked like peach after it's rained.
Oh, nice. Yes. I was gonna say, so in Pine Springs, we are at a higher elevation. So we have the ponderosa trees and the pine trees, a lot of the juniper. So I kind of grew up, I call it the mountains, the more of higher elevation. And so we have the canyon to go down in, and there's water down there. And so it's a beautiful area. And I'm sure that you're there in Peach Springs, you're used to some of that kind of terrain as well. You have the Grand Canyon though.
Yeah, and the Colorado River. Hey.
Yeah. So we're small scale compared to yours.
We're all different, but all beautiful in our own ways.
Yeah.
So, yes. So I'm going to ask, is everyone registered to vote in the primary or our November elections here? And I'm looking at the screens for head nods because I will bully you. Hey. Especially now, I mean, people are literally, dying to stand up for what they believe in. And I just think about, even more so our responsibilities, because the leaders who are making policies, who are implementing day-to-day actions, we're with better planning, our situation with the COVID-19 could be a whole different reality. And that's that in itself is like the real world example to me to vote, because whomever is leading you is, you know, in those emergency situations, we're living it right now, what that type of leadership can be or not. Are you ready, Lisa?
Yeah, sorry. Okay.
That's
No
okay.
worries.
Well, there we go.
Ooh.
So here is the PowerPoint presentation. The organization that I work for, Instituto, is committed to building political power for communities of low income and minority communities. And Instituto is doing this by providing incubation, acceleration, and capacity building for individuals and organizations that work with these communities. And so that's my friend's little boy right there in that outfit. I had asked her to use that picture. He's so cute.
Mm-hmm.
So the Native American Voter Engagement Project we're working on, we are trying to really work with the communities to make sure that the communities and the institutions within the community have the resources that they need. And that's why with this contest, we're providing $30,000. So this could go to a person, or this could go to an organization that is already doing, you know, get out the vote engagement activities, or someone that just has a really great idea of how to get more Native people out to the polls. In the state of Arizona, Arizona really is at a historic crossroads right now. We have fast changing demographics. It's one of the largest growing states. And also it is going to be a battleground state for the leadership that is running for office. And so Native people are a very, very important voting bloc in these years, this year's elections. And so to that end, we are offering $30,000 to an individual or organization for the most innovative and strategic idea of how to increase the Native American voter participation in this year's 2020, and this would be the presidential elections in November. And who is eligible to apply are Arizona tribal members and organizations serving the Arizona Native American communities. And so we are asking that applicants be 18 years or older, and they can apply for this contest. And we had briefly gone over the history of voting, but a lot of people don't realize that Native American people were one of the last groups that were received were granted full citizenship, and with that, you know, included the right to vote. Because Arizona, they had even, and it's really sad to study the history of this, you know, a lot of the Native American people who registered for the war, the Navajo code talkers who served in World War II, came back and were not allowed to vote. And, you know, that's, I think, just disgraceful. But, you know, the state also had literacy tests that were enforced, and this prevented 90% of Native people from voting. So it wasn't until a series of lawsuits that in 1972, just 40, well, I was gonna say we do the math over again on that one, but you know, just it's been recent that Arizona finally repealed its state literacy test. And so now Native people have the ability to get out and vote. And we talked about, you know, why Native people should vote. We want to exercise our power as voters at the state, the local, and the national level of people in the elections there. And the Indian country voting bloc is becoming an increasingly powerful voting bloc. And the, you know, Native vote has been very significant in some of the state, local, and important national races. So the background with our Native American Voter Engagement Project, and I wanted to bring out this number here. So the estimated population of Arizona voters is 225,631. So if you look at that group of people, only 120,000 or 57% of natives are registered to vote. So we are really, really at less than 60% of us that are eligible to vote that are registered. And so we need to really increase our numbers there. The Native American population is very young. Every 4 years, about 500,000 Native young people in the US turn 18 and become eligible to vote. So we are really looking at trying to engage and inform and educate our young Native voting bloc and get them, to become civically involved and engaged. Some of the key issues that bring Native people to the ballot box are tribal government sovereignty, Indian child welfare, education, water, energy, gaming, environmental impact issues, federal budget and spending. I mean, some of these issues, all impact our tribal communities. And so these are issues that we should all care about and, want to come out and vote for elected officials that will, make sure that they serve our interests and the interests of our tribal communities. And so we're familiar with the barriers and common problems in Native communities. I think the Navajo Times just published an article and referenced the NARF report, which came out on June 6th, of the barriers to voting in Indian country. And so we're familiar with some of those in our tribal communities, and a lot of times that boils down to transportation, registration problems, not having the right paperwork, the lack of ID, the lack of resources and funding, and the low levels of trust in government, and then low levels of political engagement, thinking that, my vote doesn't count, I'm not going to vote. There have been, some highly educated people and friends that I actually know, and they don't vote because they feel like their vote's, not making a difference. And so, it's really talking to, I think, our friends and our family and encouraging them to vote and to participate. So here's our contest, and we are going to be officially opening the application process July 20th. And then I don't know if that timeline had any of the, I was gonna say other items on there. I'm missing some of those dates here. Does that come up? Okay, so there we go. So the contest begins July 20th. The applications are due August 19th. August 26th, finalists are going to be notified, and then we are planning to have a showcase of those 5 finalists August 31st. And so that's the grant application process, or the contest process for the 30,000. Some of the details here, someone can contact me, and my phone number and my email is there. I hopefully will be sharing that with you, April, and you can share that to your network of people. I think that, one of the things I would ask that is that we do engage our young people, and we let them know, hey, there's this contest, you could win $30,000, let's come up with an idea of, how we can get more Native people to come out to the polls and vote, and encourage our young people, because they have some fantastic ideas. Some of the marketing and advertising techniques that they are seeing and, being recipients of, I think are really important. And, some of the forward thinking of how to engage their peers to vote too. So, pass the word, and let, our communities know that there's this contest for this. And that's my information there with my email, our address there in Phoenix. And the website is instituto and then .io, and the Native American Voter Engagement Project. I hope that the link will be up and running for people to check that out at the website.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that contest information, and we'll share the link in a follow-up email that we usually send today. Uh, in closing, I definitely want to thank everyone for your participation. We wanted a lot of engagement, and I'm glad that everyone was sharing their experiences. And Raina, definitely want to thank you for coming and sharing the work that you're doing, because in the end, it's all about bettering our tribal communities, and this is one way to do it. Um, I also, just because of time, I wanted to also share, in the vein of betterment of our tribal communities and different ways of empowering ourselves. One of the projects that Tinhorn is working with, it has to do with a free, like an e-consignment website for Indigenous artists, crafters, and producers. So if I guess a target artist would be someone who has current inventory of crafts or jewelry or products. Our client is looking to basically fill up their e-commerce site as they're launching it, and it's at there's no membership fee. There's a bunch of benefits. So if this is you, or if it's someone that you know, can you please connect us, because we'd like to help our Indigenous artists, especially with COVID-19, how gathering, Santa Fe Indian Market, all these major activities that for our artists, that they build up their inventory, and that's how they support themselves now that they're gone for 2020. This is an avenue for them to be able to sell, and it basically allows an artist more time to create, less time to have to ship or deal with credit cards. And so again, if that's you or someone you know, please contact us, and we'll be sharing stuff as well on that project. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on our 12th episode of Eat, Learn, and Grow with Tinhorn. As always, Miss Lisa, thank you for making all the magic and everything running smoothly. Thank you, everybody, for your participation, and have a beautiful Friday, and please get some rest this weekend. We all need to, even though it feels like things are slower, they're not. So please take care of yourself at this time. You matter, and we need you. So I'll see you later. Take care.
Thank you.